CEO Daddy. Chapter 1301, Special Arrangement. Benson did not expect that he would receive such a mission in the middle of the night. The reason why Benson did not view it as a mission was because he revered power and position. He felt that this was an opportunity to reach an agreement with the president and was also an important turning point in his life. Thus, he, who always valued appearances, paid extra attention to his own words and deeds when he went to work the next morning. He had a face that many women liked. He had rare phoenix eyes, smiling lips, handsome eyes, and funny words. Many women had come to him on their own accord. Benson was a diplomat, but due to some important dereliction of duty, he had fallen from his position to become an administrative employee in the Department of Public Information. Although his position had been demoted, he still smiled and lived a good life, which was quite impressive. Benson took the initiative to help a colleague deliver the information to the archives in the early morning. He was dressed in his work clothes, looking handsome and sunny, with a good temperament. He was curious about the appearance of his target. Just as Benson was walking down a corridor, suddenly, a girl walked out. The information in both their hands accidentally crashed into each other and dropped onto the ground. I'm sorry, the girl was in a panic as she quickly bent over to pick up the documents. Benson also quickly admitted his wrongs. It's my fault. I left in a bit of a hurry. The girl looked up and smiled at him, indicating her responsibilities. When Benson reached out to pick up the document in front of her, he suddenly saw the number plate on her clothes. On it were the words Alvina Miller. Which department are you from? Benson was alarmed and anxious for a moment. He did not expect that it would be such a coincidence that he would bump into Alvina Miller on the way to the archives, so he could only calm his mind and pretend to be curious. From the archives, Alvina Miller pointed to her work card. Benson's expression flashed. He suddenly and quickly picked up a few documents that did not belong to him, and mixed them into the pile of documents, and then pretended to be in a hurry to stand up. I'm rushing to attend the meeting. After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the Department of Public Information, deciding not to go back to the archives. He believed that very soon, Alvina Miller would come over to him to retrieve the documents. These documents were all very important and needed to be kept in the archives. Oh, who was a newbie? Never thought that the other party would take her documents wrong. She felt that since she could not understand the contents of the documents, the other party would definitely not take them without a good reason. After all, exchanging for the wrong things was very troublesome. Unfortunately, Alvina Miller was too naive. Olivia's work also officially started. She took off her jacket, wearing a blue turtleneck sweater, with rolled-up sleeves, revealing her wide and slender arms, and tied up her long hair into a ponytail. Holding a brush, she drew on the wall as if it was natural for her to do so. Olivia's phone suddenly popped up with a message. She quickly put down her brush and spoke to the assistant beside her. Get my phone. Olivia stared at her phone for a moment, and then immediately smiled and said, I have something to take care of in the afternoon. Go and pack up here. The assistant hurriedly nodded her head in agreement. Olivia untied her long hair and decided to go to the washroom to make up for her loss of makeup. This was because the president had asked for Joseph Grant to meet him for lunch at noon and wanted to invite her over. Actually, it was just a casual meal, not for outsiders but for the leaders inside. They were having lunch together and Olivia knew that this was her chance, so she would naturally not miss it. Olivia took her handbag and quickly went to the bathroom. Just as she went in, she saw a woman who was also fixing her face in the mirror. Seeing the beautiful woman that entered, Kelly hurriedly put away the cheap cosmetics she was holding. A pair of beautiful eyes that could not hide the hatred in them stared at Olivia. Being also a woman, Olivia seemed to know the jealousy in the other party's eyes. However, she didn't care. Beautiful things were born to make people jealous, and neither were women. Who wouldn't envy those born beautiful? Kelly did not leave immediately. She pretended to take out her phone to play with. Olivia opened her handbag and took out all sorts of luxurious and expensive cosmetics. Every single one of them were things that Kelly would dream of possessing, just like how she had seen Alvina Miller's makeup bag before. When she saw those things that she might not be able to own in her entire life, she finally understood that everything that contributed to a beautiful woman could only be described as expensive. Olivia traced her red lips and noticed that the woman beside her was secretly looking at her. She put down her lipstick, and then asked indifferently, "Miss, do you need my help?" Kelly came back to her senses and laughed coldly. "Why do I need your help? I thought you wanted to know about the effects of my cosmetics." The corner of Olivia's mouth hooked up into a smile with obvious ridicule. Kelly's face instantly turned pale white. She snorted, then quickly left. Olivia straightened her collar, rejoicing that she had dressed pretty beautifully today, so she believed that she would not lose her grace when she was on the dining table later. Joseph Grant was invited by the president to have lunch with the officials on the third floor of the dining hall. Lieutenant Hilton asked worriedly from the side, "Sir, the president suddenly invited you to have lunch together. What is his intention?" "Maybe it's something to do with the recent comments of some politicians. He wants to do the ostensible job of easing up on me," Joseph Grant said indifferently. "Is it because they say your shooting has something to do with him? Is it not a terrorist act?" Lieutenant Hilton could not help but ask. "Maybe, no matter what, since he invited me, I have to go," Joseph Grant sneered. "It's just a meal. There shouldn't be any danger." The Lieutenant Hilton wanted to stay close to protect them, but the people at the table were all important ministers of the country. He probably did not have the authority to sit at the table. "Don't worry, I will be careful. There are quite a few of us, so he won't act recklessly." Joseph Grant was not afraid. At the lunch, Joseph Grant's seat was only second to the president, but beside him, there was surprisingly a beautiful woman. It was indeed Olivia. The moment she entered the door, she heard the staff saying that her seat was next to Joseph Grant, and she was immediately overjoyed. This was only a very private lunch, so it didn't seem that important anymore. When Joseph Grant stepped in and saw Olivia, his beautiful eyes slightly changed. "Hello, Mr. Vice President." Olivia stood up quickly and greeted him politely. "Why are you here too?" Joseph Grant sat down on his seat, expressing his surprise. "I came here because I was invited by the president. I feel honored to sit beside Mr. Vice President in terms of etiquette." Olivia had always been decent. On the round table, the two important ministers sat down. Old President looked at them and smiled. Olivia must be very boring to accompany old men for lunch. "Luckily, I arranged for our young and promising Mr. Vice President to sit beside you. Young people do not have a generation gap, so you can communicate through your thoughts." The group of officials below also laughed and agreed, but Joseph Grant just smiled faintly. "Your Excellency, I am grateful. but I am afraid Olivia will despise me for being so boring. However, Olivia laughed at the perfect time. Mr. Vice President is too modest. I have always admired your talent and bearing. To have such a good opportunity to eat and exchange with you is truly a very blissful thing. It was just a simple meal. The officials at the table were not discussing national affairs, but was instead the wine and food that was being served at noon. Olivia had already given them one round of wine, her face slightly red. She was almost drunk on the spot. Joseph Grant had a good drinking capacity, and furthermore, his subordinate sheltered him a lot of alcohol secretly. As a result, although his face was slightly red, he did not seem to be drunk. Suddenly, Olivia, who was beside him, leaned on his shoulder. Chapter 1302. She couldn't help but worry for him. Joseph Grant looked to the side and saw the woman's red face and her delicate body that she could not support. Olivia was drunk. Joseph, you're a man. Take care of her. Old President immediately reminded Joseph Grant with a gentle smile. Joseph Grant was a humble and courteous person in the first place. In front of so many people, he obviously could not just push Olivia away, and could only ask her in a low voice, "Olivia, are you all right? I feel dizzy." "Mr. Vice President, I'm so sorry. Can you let me lean on you for a little longer?" Olivia immediately revealed a charming look, wanting to take the chance to lie on this man's body for a while longer. "If you're drunk, I'll get the staff to take you to rest." Joseph Grant immediately looked at the Lieutenant Hilton at the door and hinted at him with his eyes. "No need. Actually, I'm not that drunk either. I haven't eaten yet, so I'm a bit hungry." Seeing that she was about to be escorted away, Olivia forced herself to sit up straight. Old President laughed and said, "Joseph, young man, you need to know how to take pity on women. Half of Olivia's drunkenness is in the wine, while the other half is in the people." "Mr. President, you're joking." Olivia immediately lowered her head in embarrassment, but her beautiful eyes were filled with happiness, and she secretly looked at Joseph Grant's expression. Joseph Grant laughed politely and did not reply. Mr. Vice President is a man of honor, a role model for young people to learn. He only cares about their career and never wastes time on relationships, one of the officials beside him joked. Joseph Grant continued to smile as he lifted his cup and took a sip. "However," Olivia said, "men are the most charming when they work seriously. It's hard to forget Mr. Vice President's elegance. It's just that, with a woman by your side, life will be a little better." "Could it be that Olivia has fallen for him?" a nearby minister asked with a smile. Olivia took this opportunity to confess to Joseph Grant. She smiled shyly and looked at Joseph Grant's handsome face, then said softly, "I naturally admire Sir, but I know that Sir is too outstanding, and do not dare to be delusional." When Joseph Grant saw that everyone's topic was on him, he had no choice but to say, "Everyone's concerned for me. I am deeply grateful, but it is only for my own reasons, and I am not too interested in matters of falling in love. I hope everyone will have the opportunity to be more concerned about official matters." Seeing Joseph Grant's cold reply, Olivia's face darkened. However, the more uninterested Joseph Grant was in the relationship between a man and a woman, the more Olivia decided to subdue him. Normally, if such a man were to fall in love, then it would be as hot as fire. Olivia felt that Joseph Grant was the treasure that she wanted to dig up, and she felt that the things that this man was thinking about must be extremely abundant. It wasn't that she hadn't seen a man of the abstinence attribute before, but it was really the first time she had met a man with such an outstanding abstinence attribute like Joseph Grant. At the same time, Alvina Miller was busy organizing the documents she had brought back. Strange, the 7th and 10th pages are both missing. It can't be that the man really picked them up wrongly, right? How could this happen? Alvina Miller's mind exploded. Fortunately, as she was in a hurry just now, she had glanced at his work card and discovered that he was from the Department of Public Information. Thus, Alvina Miller had decided to ask that man for the documents. Alvina Miller hurriedly walked towards the information department. It was already time for lunch. When she reached the entrance of the DPI hall, she saw groups of men and women in overalls coming out of the hall towards the dining hall. Alvina Miller anxiously stood at the side and watched. Suddenly, she saw the man that he accidentally bumped into. Benson had been waiting for Alvina Miller to come and find him at noon, but he didn't expect that he would see her at this time. Sorry to interrupt, but do you remember me? We bumped into each other this morning and got the files wrong. Can you? Hello, I'm Benson. What's your name? Benson introduced himself with a smile. The colleagues who passed by all looked at the two of them in surprise. My name is Alvina Miller. Can I trouble you? Why don't we eat together and then come back and get the files? I've already put the document in the cabinet. The key is not in my hand, so I'll have to go to my colleague for a meal before opening the door, Benson immediately suggested in a friendly manner. Oh, then I'll come back later. I won't disturb you any longer. Hearing his answer, Alvina Miller knew that she wouldn't be able to take it back now. She quickly turned around and left. When the other girls spoke to him, they didn't dare to look him in the eye. This was because they were shy all the time, but that girl just now had a very polite manner as she looked into his eyes and spoke to him. Benson found this very interesting. Alvina Miller returned to the office vexedly and went to the cafeteria with her senior-level colleagues. The moment she sat down, she heard a table of girls beside her discussing something in low voices. Today, I heard that the president has invited the vice president and a group of ministers to meet for a meal on the 3rd floor. Really? Is it to break the rumors that I've told you about before? I also believe that Mr. President wouldn't hurt anyone. Mr. Vice President must have been attacked by terrorists. Alvina Miller perked up her ears. Her heart immediately tensed up. She could not help but look up the stairs. The 3rd floor was a private room. It was mainly a place where ministers and foreign envoys could receive guests. Ordinary staff were not allowed to enter. The president was treating Joseph Grant to a meal? Could it be another Hongman banquet? Alvina, why are you still in the daze? Even the food is getting cold? A kind elder sister beside reminded her. Oh, I'm not very hungry. Alvina Miller hurriedly answered with an absent-minded smile. She was truly worried that something would happen to Joseph Grant again, but the surrounding people were all certain that it wasn't the president. Furthermore, Joseph Grant didn't seem to be injured in the eyes of outsiders. She knew that he was injured, and seriously, but he had been holding it in. When she thought about how he would play golf with foreign envoys with injuries, which caused tears and a second stitch, her heart hurt indescribably. She knew Joseph Grant's ability to resist pain was stronger than others, but no matter how strong he was, his body was not made of iron. I'm full. You guys take your time. I'm leaving first. Alvina Miller suddenly stood up, and after saying that to her colleagues, she rushed out of the canteen. Just as she walked to the door, she met a group of her colleagues in the reception room, including Kelly. In the direct confrontation, some of the colleagues waved at Alvina Miller to greet her. Kelly only raised her head to look at her for a moment, before turning her face away, as if she did not recognize her. Alvina Miller was startled, and then she could only laugh it off. Kelly refused to be friends with her was a good thing. In any case, she did not take the initiative to hurt anyone, so what was there to be afraid of? Alvina Miller walked to the entrance of the elevator. A thought quickly flashed through her mind. She then mysteriously pressed down on the elevator, and when the door opened, her fingers uncontrollably pressed down on the third floor. Alvina Miller's nervous palms were sweating, but she had a strong desire to see if Joseph Grant was all right or not. She must be crazy, for she had forgotten about all the things Joseph Grant had told her. However, she couldn't resist the urge to take care of him. The elevator door opened, and the moment Alvina Miller stepped out of the elevator, she was startled by the number of corridors in front of her. When she was in the reception room, she had been here before, but now, she didn't know where to go, and didn't know which room Joseph Grant and the rest were in. Just as Alvina Miller was feeling dizzy, two men in black suits walked over and said to her with a stern expression, "It is prohibited to enter here. Please leave immediately." It was only then that Alvina Miller realized that wanting to get close to Joseph Grant in the executive office was simply a pipe dream. With layers of strict guards, it was enough to put her as far away from him as it could be. Chapter 1303, How to Make It Up to Her. Alvina Miller was stopped by the serious bodyguards. She had no choice but to turn and walk towards the stairs. When Alvina Miller went to work in the afternoon, she was a little distracted. However, she still went to the Department of Public Information to look for Benson to retrieve some documents. Benson sat at his desk, and when he saw her appearance, he revealed his standard smile. Alvina Miller also smiled at him. "Sorry to trouble you." "It's no trouble." Benson got up, opened a cabinet, took out his documents and started rummaging through. Both of Alvina Miller's hands were in her pockets, and her beautiful eyes took the opportunity to size up the Department of Public Information's office. She discovered that the entire office's decorations were all the same, strict and dull, grand and tall, but all the staff were not warm at all. "Found it." Benson's voice interrupted Alvina Miller's train of thoughts, causing her to quickly lower her head to look. Benson also happened to raise his head and look at her. Seeing her clear eyes and exquisite facial features, he was slightly startled. "Thank you." Alvina Miller took the documents. Without stopping, she turned and left. Benson forgot to put his hand back until the beautiful figure disappeared from the door of the office. Only then did one of the male colleagues by his side reached out and patted his shoulder. "Did you lose your soul? Which department was that girl in? She looks unfamiliar, but she's really pretty. It makes my eyes light up." Benson knew from birth that men were visual creatures. Who wouldn't want to stare at beautiful women? But Alvina Miller was his target. He would obviously not let any other man interfere. He only laughed and said nothing. Kelly also heard the news that the leaders were having lunch together. Furthermore, The department she was in was a center for news, so Kelly knew that Olivia was also present for this lunch. Her brain exploded, and the jealousy in her eyes could not be hidden. Feeling that the sky was falling, that kind of gloomy and desperate feeling, made Kelly's brain bulge. She leaned on the wall weakly, her heart filled with negative pessimism. No, I can't give up. Even if I can't compare to that Olivia, I have to bet. Kelly had finally decided to take the initiative once, but she didn't know how she could get close to Joseph Grant. If she were to confess to Joseph Grant in the executive office, she would lose all her face if he were to reject her. So, she had to confess in a place that others couldn't see. Kelly thought about it for a while and decided to go to the Vice President Palace. Although she knew it was impossible for her to enter, what if she met the Mr. Vice President halfway? Anything was possible, just as she had been startled by his car when she arrived. Didn't they talk? After Kelly made up her mind, her mood improved a little. After lunch, Olivia sat on the chair in the conference room as if she had lost her soul, one hand supporting her face. She was staring at the sky outside the window in a daze. She was only pretending to be drunk and wanted to use the opportunity to lean on the man's shoulder that was full of sense of security. Sure enough, after trying, she found out that his shoulder was very thick and his arm was definitely a safe haven for women. She was very confident that she would be able to get there in the future. Olivia, are you still painting in the afternoon? The assistant asked her in a daze. No, I have to slowly paint. I can't paint too fast. I need more time to work here, Olivia answered her as if in a dream. The assistant didn't quite understand, but she was even more confused. Joseph Grant returned to his office, and as he drank a bit of alcohol at noon, at that moment, he wanted to rest for 10 minutes before working. Lieutenant Hilton whispered next to him, "Sir, I heard that Miss Miller went to the 3rd floor, but was stopped by bodyguards." The man with closed eyes suddenly opened his eyes. The light in the depths of his eyes suddenly faded. His brows gently furrowed as he asked, "Why would she go there?" "I guess the Miss Miller is worried about you. After all, you are going to eat with the president," Lieutenant Hilton guessed boldly. Joseph Grant's sexy lips couldn't help but rise a little. "I'll go look for her later, and ask her about this, sir. You already know that the president is investigating your relationship behind your back. If you go too often, won't you be questioned?" Lieutenant Hilton was also thinking wholeheartedly for his master's sake. After all, the situation was grim and he needed to plan every step of the way. "If I knew it would be so difficult, I wouldn't have known her." Pain and helplessness flashed across Joseph Grant's handsome face. "This is what happens when there is trouble, and when Sir experiences this with Miss Miller, your feelings are even more genuine." The Lieutenant Hilton smiled and advised, "If I lost her in my life, I'm afraid I won't even know what kind of beauty I missed. I won't even have the chance to see her again." The smile on Joseph Grant's face was still very satisfied. "Yes, ever since Sir was together with Miss Miller, you seem to like laughing even more." Lieutenant Hilton also felt that love was a good thing that could make people happy. "Is that so?" Joseph Grant didn't realize it himself. "Yes, Miss Miller did a great job," Lieutenant Hilton said with certainty. "Since she did so much, I might as well go over and see her at night. I can't just give up on her." Although Joseph Grant tried to find an excuse, he only had one thought in his heart: to see her. This was a reflection from the bottom of his heart. All right. The Lieutenant Hilton was not a heartless person, but Sir's face was full of longing. How could he not see through it? In the afternoon, Alvina Miller received a call from her mother. Her mother said that she wanted to meet her for dinner, and since Alvina Miller hadn't seen her for a long time, she agreed. Mrs. Miller had dated a very outstanding man, who was older than her by quite a bit, but the two of them were companions. Mrs. Miller had always wanted to introduce him to Alvina Miller, but Alvina Miller had always rejected this matter. Until now, she had merely asked about her mother and that man, and Mrs. Miller tactfully did not speak of it. After eating, Alvina Miller was about to leave. Mrs. Miller looked at her daughter's back and sighed while shaking her head. When Alvina Miller came out, she realized that it snowed again and a cold feeling hid her face. She couldn't help but rub her hands together. As she drove, all she could think about was her mother's gentle expression when she mentioned the man. Was her mother going to marry him? What about her? Could it be the superfluous existence in her life? Tears rolled in her eyes. Everyone felt that she was independent, very strong, only she knew. She was afraid of everything, afraid that her grandfather would grow old, afraid that her mother would remarry, afraid that she would die, afraid that the people she liked did not love her. Joseph Grant, Alvina Miller sniffed, then stepped on the gas pedal faster. By the time she returned to the Grant family residence, it was already past 10. Alvina Miller looked at the dark and gray house, and her anticipation in her heart failed. It turned out that even though she rushed back so anxiously, she was still alone. Alvina Miller took in a deep breath, and suppressed all of her sadness back to the bottom of her heart. Grandfather said before, a day was not long. Choosing to be happy or sad, they are all things that she can decide. To stay away from the people that make you sad, and get along with the people that make you happy, was the actions of a smart person. Alvina Miller puffed her cheeks, and decided to pick a puppy from the pet store tomorrow. At least this way, she wouldn't be lonely. But she quickly dispelled this thought, because she couldn't even take care of herself now, so how could she go and harm the little animals? After taking a bath and wearing a warm robe, Alvina Miller strolled around the room alone to pour herself a cup of warm water. As she drank, she headed upstairs. She unknowingly went to Joseph Grant's room. Tonight, I want to sleep here. She did not turn on the light, and the light from the street lamp outside the window shone in. She lifted off the blanket, and curled her body into a ball as she shivered. Around 1 a.m. in the morning, Alvina Miller was sleeping soundly, as if something had lightly touched her face. It was warm, like the sunlight in spring, and the itchy feeling made her feel uncomfortable. She turned around and pulled up the blanket, hiding her face and continuing to sleep. The man bent over her bed, watching her childish movements, his thin lips drawn up in a smile. Chapter 1304. A Woman's Counterattack. The room was dark, barely visible, but the man knew that her brow must be furrowed. The air conditioner in the room was not turned on. It was very cold, but Alvina Miller, who was hiding under the blanket, was sleeping soundly. Joseph Grant stood up straight, a little unwilling to wake her up, but he also didn't want to leave like this. Thus, he decided to first take a bath, then come over and sleep with her. After Joseph Grant found his clothes and pants, he went to the public bathroom outside the corridor and took a bath. He turned on the light, and saw that the girl's daily necessities were filled to the brim with two cabinets, and inside the bathroom, he could vaguely smell the faint fragrance that was coming from her. Joseph Grant felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction when he saw the bathroom being completely occupied by the girl's things. Suddenly, his eyes caught sight of another glass beside him. He picked it up and looked at it. There was still some red wine left in it. This woman was drinking while bathing? Where did she get the wine? Joseph Grant suddenly remembered that there were a lot of them in his wine cabinet. Seems like she had opened up his wine shelves to drink. Was she in a bad mood? She wanted to use the wine to dispel worries. The man's heart trembled and his movements involuntarily quickened. After washing up, he walked out of the room with quick steps. Just that, when Joseph Grant pushed open the door to enter, he felt something smashing towards his head from the left. Fortunately, his reaction was quick. In the next second, he reached out and restrained this petite body from hiding behind the door. "It's me." As the deep male voice faded, the struggling body in his embrace softened. Joseph Grant. Alvina Miller had also just woken up, and felt that someone had entered her room. She immediately took out a baseball bat to protect herself in fear. And the reason why she had such wild thoughts about those bad guys was because Joseph Grant had given her a bad impression. She felt that there would always be people watching her from the shadows. "You almost killed your husband." The man held her tightly in his embrace. Feeling that her body was still warm, he started to chuckle in her ear. "Why did you come back so late?" Alvina Miller's mental state loosened. In the next second, she was in his embrace, feeling even warmer than a blanket. "I've missed you. Is that reason enough?" the man said hoarsely. Alvina Miller's body trembled. An electric current flowed out from her ears and into her entire body. She subconsciously groaned, unable to endure the sudden warmth. Joseph Grant, who was originally very calm, violently shook after hearing her low mutter. Immediately after, his thin lips could not help but form a kiss on her small mouth that leaked out his voice. Alvina Miller didn't expect that he would be so passionate in the middle of the night. The dizziness and drowsiness instantly disappeared and her entire body seemed to have been ignited as well. Under the cover of the darkness, the two of them spun in a circle before rolling onto the bed. Under the cover of the thick blanket, everything seemed to have become even more natural. Alvina Miller was so pressured that she almost couldn't breathe. Her mind was buzzing and was completely blank. The man's rationality gradually returned. Finally, he propped up his hands and stared at the little woman who was breathing heavily in the darkness. "I heard that you went to the third floor of the canteen today. Why are we going there?" The man hurriedly tried to find a topic to talk about to break this endless ambiguous feeling. "Of course I'm worried about you. I'm afraid you'll get hurt again." Alvina Miller felt her head swell, and quickly replied him. "Since when are you so concerned about me? Am I really flattered?" The man chuckled, carrying a trace of evilness with him. "Are you making fun of me, Joseph Grant? Are you stupid? Is it not good to care about you?" Alvina Miller was not a shy little girl. When she heard that the man still had the mood to laugh at her, she violently retorted. Not only that, she pushed his waist upwards, causing the man to immediately let out a painful groan. "Alvina, you're getting more and more restless." Joseph Grant laughed helplessly, but his voice was extremely hoarse. Alvina Miller was also shocked by the sudden movement just now. She then playfully said, "I don't want to be tame. If not, I will be bullied to death by you." "When did I bully you? Is it obvious you are bullying me?" The man rolled over and lay down, relieving the heavy pressure from her body. However, in the next second, he turned into the person who was being suppressed. Alvina Miller arrogantly placed all the weight on top of his body, and said angrily, "Since you want to say it like that, then I won't be polite." "Alvina, what are you doing?" Joseph Grant tensed up. His body tensed up, and felt that there was nothing he could do with this woman, if she wanted to. "Since it's the middle of the night and you're disturbing my dream, of course you have to give me some compensation." Alvina Miller had almost gotten married with him in her dreams just now. Now that she was awake, where could she go find that sweet feeling? "Stop, Alvina." The man realized that the woman wasn't joking. Where were her two small hands going? The girl laughed evilly. Alvina Miller actually just wanted to play, like a curious baby. She wanted to explore an unknown domain. However, after she truly explored it, her mind buzzed and she stopped moving. Cough. "Actually, I just wanted to take a look and have no other thoughts." Alvina Miller quickly let go of her hand, then turned and lay down obediently like an obedient baby. Joseph Grant caught his breath, and the moment he saw her loosen her grip, it was as if he had come back to life the instant he died. He panted heavily, turned his head, and stared deeply at her hazy little face. "Alvina, are you angry?" Joseph Grant's finger gently touched her charming face. It really was scalding hot. "No." The girl bit her lips as she replied. "Is it because I didn't come find you in time that you were lonely?" Joseph Grant still asked. Alvina Miller turned around and fiercely dived into his embrace, her two small hands tightly holding onto him. "Joseph Grant, in the past, when I was alone, I didn't feel lonely anywhere. But now, even though I'm obviously still alone, why do I feel lonely?" Alvina Miller sobbed and asked him. Joseph Grant's heart ached for her. He hugged her in his embrace, and kissed her head. "Because your heart is filled with me. Then can I ask you to leave my heart?" Alvina Miller mischievously asked. "How dare you?" Joseph Grant was instantly angered. "You're still acting like a scoundrel." Alvina Miller immediately turned from crying to smiling, just like how it was in June, changing at will. "Alvina, I'm sorry." The man didn't continue to be tough. He only let out a soft sigh. "I'm tired of listening to your apology. Can you change it to something else?" Alvina Miller knew that this man was blaming himself, but she didn't need him to. "I don't know what else I can do to make you happier every day." Joseph Grant's mind was a complete blank. In the face of feelings, his wisdom and cleverness could not be displayed anywhere, because the girl in his embrace was also someone who did not follow common sense. He could not guess what she was thinking. "If you think about me a few more times a day, I'll be happy." Alvina Miller's request was very simple. "Of course I miss you," Joseph Grant said in an almost certain tone. "I know." Alvina Miller's small mouth kissed his neck, and muttered, "I know." Joseph Grant couldn't help but laugh out loud. His finger lightly patted the back of her hand. "Sleep, I won't leave tonight." "All right." Alvina Miller knew that it was impossible for more things to happen, but of course, she wasn't mentally prepared. She was already satisfied to have his embrace to lean on. Joseph Grant also calmed his thoughts. He would not go deep into their relationship too early. Even if his body was screaming and disturbing him, he would definitely not harm her. The most precious thing was always to stay on the best days. Dempsey Wilson received an invitation. The son of a big client was getting married and was inviting him over for a wedding. Because he was a close customer, Dempsey Wilson decided to head there. If this had happened in the past, he would have definitely brought his wife with him. But now that the situation was tense, he decided to only go with a few of his friends. Chapter 1305, Detect Something Fishy. Alan Wood and Billy William had also received an invitation to attend the wedding banquet that Dempsey Wilson was going to attend, so they made an agreement to attend it together. The three friends arrived at the banquet site on time. It was the second-floor hall of a large star hotel. Larissa Reed sat in the makeup room and looked at the bridesmaid dress she was wearing. Some of the lace she was wearing made her feel inferior and unsightly to others. Larissa Reed looked at the bride who was looking left and right in disgust at her dressing table, feeling that she really didn't have any sincerity at all. She was wearing a wedding dress that was worth millions. Yet she bought 6 bridesmaids such ugly dresses, just to show off her noble and beautiful appearance. If it wasn't for her knowing that Dempsey Wilson's name was among the invited guests, Larissa Reed would definitely reject such an invitation. She and the bride had been classmates with overseas for 2 years, and they had formed a friendship. Thus, she would have had the chance to be her bridesmaid. Larissa Reed could not stand the rustic blue lace on the dress, so she intentionally drew it on a sharp object, causing a sound of teat, and caused everyone to look at her. "It's over. My clothes were torn." Larissa Reed immediately revealed an annoyed expression. A flash of unhappiness appeared on the bride's face. On her wedding day, something like this actually happened. She immediately walked over and checked. "Larissa, what are you doing? Why don't I take the scissors and cut off the lace? There's not much of a difference," Larissa Reed immediately said with a smile. "All right then, it's up to you. It's almost time. Hurry up." At this moment, the bride was in no mood to pay attention to her. A staff member on the other side had already warned her to get ready to go on stage. Larissa Reed quickly cut off the lace on her skirt. The skirt that was a bit too much just a moment ago, was now cut in half by her. She immediately revealed her slender and fair beautiful legs, causing her temperament to immediately increase by a lot. Larissa Reed was also a very scheming woman. She would definitely leave a good impression on Dempsey Wilson. Under her father's lead, the bride walked across the red carpet with the music playing. Larissa Reed stood behind the bride. Suddenly, she saw Dempsey Wilson and a man who was equally handsome sitting in the front row of seats, discussing something softly. Her heart skipped a beat. When she saw him before, she would only glance at him in a hurry, unable to leave a deep imprint on his handsome face. Now, being able to size up this perfect and noble man at such a close distance, Larissa Reed's mood was extremely good. Larissa Reed did not take in a single word of the bride and groom's oath. Her smiling eyes would occasionally steal a glance at Dempsey Wilson, but Dempsey Wilson did not speak to any of his friends anymore. Instead, he sat upright with his hands at the corner of his knees, politely looking at the pair of newlyweds on the stage. Larissa Reed's heart felt as though it had been ruthlessly pulled out by an invisible hand, causing ripples. She really didn't expect that being stared at by this man would make her so flustered. Even though she knew that he was looking at the pair of newlyweds beside her, she had a misconception that Dempsey Wilson was also looking at her. She was suddenly envious of his wife. Being stared at by such a pair of affectionate eyes every day must have made her extremely happy. Dempsey Wilson was born with an outstanding memory, so when he went to look at the couple in the audience, he inadvertently glanced at the woman beside the bride, causing him to be slightly startled. The last time this woman came to his company to apply, he had seen her face, so he remembered. Larissa Reed was not mistaken. It was true that his gaze had stopped on her, but he had shifted his gaze away in just a few seconds. Larissa Reed was extremely nervous and embarrassed. She never thought that a man's gaze, which was as cold as water, would be able to ignite the flames in her body. After the couple's speech ended, they immediately arranged seats, and Larissa Reed immediately walked over to Dempsey Wilson's table boldly. The reason why Larissa Reed dared to be so bold was because she noticed that there was an old man beside Dempsey Wilson. She seemed to know him, and could use him to sit at the table. Dempsey Wilson and his two good friends were sitting at a table. Originally, the table was filled with men, but suddenly, a beautiful woman sat down. "Uncle, it's been a long time. I never expected to meet you here." Larissa Reed walked over and immediately held onto an old man's arm respectfully as she sweetly greeted him. "Oh, I remember you. Aren't you Larissa? It's been many years since I last saw you. At the time, you were still a 15 or 16-year-old girl, but in the blink of an eye, you have grown up into a slender and elegant big girl." The old man's eyes widened, and it took him a moment to recognize her. "That's right. Although so many years have passed, your spirit is still fresh. You haven't changed at all." I'm old. Larissa Reed had already sat down on the seat since the old man was being modest, and furthermore, she was only one step away from Dempsey Wilson. "Uncle, this table is filled with business leaders, right? I don't know any of them. Can you introduce them to me? I've graduated and I'm worried about finding a job." Larissa Reed immediately pleaded with sincerity. Her voice was not considered to be coquettish, so when people heard it, they did not feel nauseous at all. This old man could be considered famous as well. He was a senior who deserved to be respected, so he immediately introduced her from Dempsey Wilson. "This is Mr. Wilson, a very young promising entrepreneur." Larissa Reed immediately looked towards Dempsey Wilson, and greeted him with both worship and shyness. "Mr. Wilson, hello." Dempsey Wilson nodded indifferently and did not say a word. "This is the young master of Wood family, and the second son of the William family is also his future hope for the business world. You can interact a bit more with them." He very responsibly only introduced a young man to Larissa Reed. Larissa Reed immediately brought out all of her sincerity and greeted Alan Wood and Leo William. Alan Wood and Leo William raised their eyebrows, looking respectful. When the few bridesmaids saw that Larissa Reed was actually sitting next to a group of young and handsome princes, they instantly revealed envious and jealous expressions. As expected, every opportunity was given to people who were well prepared. Delicious delicacies appeared on the table. There were many different kinds of seafood. It was definitely a large-scale delicacy. Larissa Reed's goal today was nothing more than to leave a good impression on Dempsey Wilson. Evidently, she did not act in a way that was out of line. Quite a few people came over to toast with them. No one would give up on such a good opportunity to curry favor with them, because this was the reality of the world. The wine in cups respected the rich. Dempsey Wilson casually drank a few mouthfuls before taking the opportunity to leave the banquet hall with his two friends. That woman seemed to be interested in Dempsey. Alan Wood's pair of eyes, under Larissa Reed's condition of not revealing anything, was actually able to see through her scheming with a single glance. "How do you know?" Dempsey Wilson's serene eyes slightly changed. "I saw her peeking at you. Isn't that obvious enough? Billy and I are also sitting next to you, but she only peeked at you." Alan Wood immediately patted Dempsey Wilson's shoulder, looking like he was trying to advise him otherwise. "Boring." Dempsey Wilson immediately pushed his arm away. "Uncle, are you worrying too much? How can we not be clear on Dempsey's character?" Billy William quickly stood to the side and joked around. "Marriage is always a sweet and loving affair in the early stages. The middle and late stages will be another story." Dempsey Wilson immediately said to Billy William, "Quickly take out your phone and record it for your cousin." Billy William quickly reached for his phone. Someone's expression changed drastically.